Harlow Seed and Feed had been in the same building since 1941, and it smelled like it. Raw burlap, dried corn, and something older underneath that no one had ever bothered to name. Tess Calloway was reading the label on a bag of winter rye when the man beside her crouched down to check the bottom pallet. His daughter, maybe 5 or 6, stood at his elbow with a small spiral notebook and a golf pencil, writing something very seriously. The store clerk came around the corner. "Your husband's got a good eye for seed weight," she said to Tess. "That lot came in damp. I'd go with the shelf above." Tess opened her mouth. The man looked up from the pallet and smiled at the clerk. "She picks better seed than I do. Always has." The clerk moved on. The little girl kept writing. Tess looked at the shelf above, then at the man who was already standing, brushing dust from his knee. "Sorry," he said. It wasn't an apology so much as an acknowledgement. The way you say sorry when you step into someone's lane on the highway and both of you know it wasn't entirely an accident. "It's fine," Tess said. She reached for the shelf above. He was right. The bags up there were firm and dry. She didn't ask his name. He didn't offer it. His daughter tugged his sleeve and showed him the notebook. He bent down to read it, and whatever she had written, "Go quiet," made him go quiet in a way that had nothing to do with the store. Tess took her seat and went to the register. In the parking lot, loading her truck, she thought about the way he'd said, "always has," without thinking. The way a person says a thing that used to be true about someone who isn't there anymore. She drove the 12 miles back to her property outside Harlow, Tennessee, and did not think about it again. Or told herself she didn't. His name was Fletcher Doone, and he had been in Harlow for 11 months. Before that, Knoxville. Before that, 7 years with the Army Corps of Engineers in 3 different states, following projects the way water follows grade. Wherever the work pointed, that was where he went. His wife, Rennie, had followed with him every time until the last time, and then she hadn't, because she was gone. Cardiac event. 34 years old. Their daughter, June, had been 4. June was 6 now, and she kept a spiral notebook in which she wrote observations. She could not yet spell most of what she was observing, so she had developed her own shorthand. A circle with a dot meant something important. Happened here. A wavy line meant, "I don't understand this yet, but I will." Fletcher had stopped trying to decode it. He had learned to simply read what she showed him and say, "I see that," and mean it. They had come to Harlow because his mother's cousin had left him a small house and 12 acres on the Elk River, and because Fletcher had been tired of following work and ready to make work follow him instead. He had a contractor's license and 2 good hands, and the kind of quiet reputation that spreads in small towns the way water spreads. Slowly, without announcement, until one day it is simply everywhere. He had been hired in September to rebuild the stone foundation wall along the lower terrace of the Calloway farm. The farm was 3 miles from his house. He had not connected the woman in the Seed and Feed to the name on the contract until the morning he showed up and she opened the door. She looked at him the same way he was looking at her. Then she stepped back and said, "Come in for coffee." And he did. And neither of them mentioned the store. The Calloway farm had been growing heritage grain for 19 years. Tess had come to it sideways. A degree in agricultural science from UT, a fellowship in seed preservation, and then a marriage that had brought her back to Harlow, to land that had been her husband's family's. And then the marriage had ended the way some marriages do. Quietly, completely, without a villain. Just 2 people who had grown in directions that no longer overlapped. That had been 3 years ago. The farm was hers now, and she ran it with 1 part-time employee, and the particular focus of someone who had decided that this specific thing, these specific fields, this seed catalog with its 340 varieties of grain, was what she was going to be about. She did not have a lot of room in that focus for anything else. She said this to her friend Darby, over the phone most Tuesday evenings, and Darby, who lived in Nashville and worked in nonprofit development and had been her college roommate, always said the same thing. "You say that like focus is the same as hiding." Tess always changed the subject. The foundation wall along the lower terrace had been failing for 2 seasons. The original stonework was Civil War era. dry-laid, and what had held it for 150 years had finally given up its argument with gravity. Fletcher assessed it on the first morning, with a level and a notebook of his own, and told her it would take 3 weeks, maybe 4, if the weather turned. He came every weekday at 7:30. He brought June on the days school was closed. He made no particular effort to be charming, and no particular effort not to be, and Tess found this more disarming than charm would have been. On the third Thursday, she brought him coffee without asking how he took it, because she had noticed. He did not comment on it. He just drank it, and went back to setting stone. That was how it started, which is to say it didn't start. It simply continued, the way things do, when two careful people are occupying the same space and trying very hard not to notice that they are. June liked the farm. She liked the grain barn with its rows of sealed glass jars, each one labeled in Tess's handwriting. She liked the dog, an old brown mutt named Cobb who slept in a patch of sun near the barn door and accepted affection without making a fuss about it. She liked Tess in the particular way children like adults who talk to them like the things they say matter, which Tess did because she had decided a long time ago that children's observations were data, and data always mattered. One afternoon in the third week, June brought her notebook to Tess and opened it to a page. Near the back, there was a circle with a dot, and beside it, careful, slow letters that spelled, "She looks at Daddy." Tess read it. She kept her face steady. "What does the circle mean?" she asked. "Something important," June said. "I see that," Tess said and handed the notebook back. June put it in her pocket and went to find Cobb. Tess went back to her seed ledger and did not write anything for several minutes. The wall was finished on a Friday. Fletcher came in at the end of the day with stone dust on his forearms and set his tools in order on the tailgate the way he always did, left to right, largest to smallest. Tess walked the length of the terrace and put her hand on the top course of stone. It was solid, it was straight. The grade behind it would drain now, instead of pool. She told him it was good work. He said thank you in the same register. He said most things, which was level and unhurried. She wrote him the check. He folded it in half and put it in his shirt pocket without looking at it. "If you need the upper drive reset in spring," he said. "The frost is going to lift 3 sections." She said she'd call him. He drove out. June waved from the passenger window. Tess raised a hand. She stood in the driveway until the truck was gone and the dust had settled and Cobb had come to lean against her leg, and she thought, "That's done then." She thought it very firmly. She called him 6 days later about the drive. The upper drive work was smaller, 2 days, maybe 3. But February in Harlow runs long, and there were afternoon sleets that pushed the work back. And on the second day, when the ground was too wet to pour gravel, Fletcher sat on the porch steps, and Tess brought out 2 mugs and sat on the step below him. And they watched the sleet come sideways across the field. He asked about the grain. She told him about heritage varieties, how a seed could carry a flavor that had been gone from the commercial market for 80 years, how the work of preservation was also the work of memory, how she sometimes opened a jar and the smell told her something about a world she hadn't lived in. He listened the way he set stone, with complete attention, no hurry. She asked about the Corps. He told her about a levee project in Missouri, about the way a river teaches you more about patience than anything else will, about standing in a channel at 4 in the morning watching the water, and understanding that you could work with it or against it, but you could not change what it was. He did not talk about Rennie. She did not talk about her marriage. They were both talking around the same silence, and they both knew it, and neither of them touched it. When the sleet eased, he went back to work. She went back inside. The mugs sat on the step for another hour before either of them thought to bring them in. It was Darby who sent the link on a Thursday evening in March, with a text that said only, "Did you see this?" The link went to a local blog called the Harlow Ledger, which covered county news, community events, and, apparently, whatever else its editor found interesting. The post was dated that afternoon. The headline read, "Callaway Farm's New Direction," or "New Distraction." The piece was written by a woman named Greta Fain. It described Tess's farm in terms that were technically accurate and slightly softened with what the writer seemed to think was wit. It mentioned the 3-year divorce. It described Fletcher as the contractor currently working the property, noted that he was a single father, and observed, with the same small smile in its voice that a certain kind of writing always uses, that recently unattached women in agricultural isolation sometimes found their judgment clouded by proximity. It included a photograph, taken through the fence line, from the road. Tess on the porch steps with 2 mugs, Fletcher sitting above her. The sleet in the frame gave it a particular quality, soft-edged, almost intimate. Tess read it twice. She set her phone face down on the table. She picked it up and read it a 3rd time. She did not call Fletcher. She went to bed and did not sleep well, and in the morning she walked the lower terrace wall and put her hand on the stone and breathed. Fletcher sent a text at 7:15. I saw it. She wrote back. I don't know who took it. He wrote, I might. Give me a few days. She almost wrote, why are you the one looking, and then didn't, because she already knew the answer, and the answer made something behind her sternum do a thing she wasn't prepared to examine. It took him 4 days. He came to the farm on a Tuesday afternoon, not to work, and he set 3 things on her kitchen table, without preamble. The first was a printout of the Harlow Ledger piece. Beside it, highlighted, the name Greta Fane. The second was a printout of 2 older Harlow Ledger pieces, both from the previous year, one about a recently widowed woman in Leoma who had sold 40 acres to a land management group 6 weeks after a similar piece ran about her, one about a divorced landowner in Colombia who had signed a mineral rights lease with a company registered in Georgia within a month of a piece, framing her as emotionally compromised. Same template, same byline. The third was a printout from the Tennessee Secretary of State's Business Registry, a consulting firm called Greenvale Land Partners, registered in Shelby County. Its listed agent, a man named Cord Fosley. Fletcher had spent 2 evenings with his old Corps colleague who now worked in county land records. Cord Fosley had been present at both subsequent land transactions. His name appeared in neither public record directly, only in the closing documents, buried in the representation chain. Tess looked at all 3 pages. She looked at them for a long time. He hasn't approached me, she said. He will, Fletcher said. The piece ran 12 days ago. Based on the other 2, you've got about 3 weeks. She sat down at the table. She thought about the farm, the 340 seed varieties in the grain barn, the lower terrace wall that was finally solid, the upper drive that was almost right. I need to make some calls, she said. I know a land attorney in Pulaski, Fletcher said. She's good. She doesn't charge for a first consultation. Tess looked up at him. He was standing on the other side of the table with his hands in his jacket pockets, and there was nothing in his expression that asked for anything. Why are you doing this? She said. He was quiet for a moment. Not because he didn't know the answer, but because he was deciding how much of it to say. Because I was there when they couldn't, he said. Rennie, my mother. Women who were on their own and people could see. They were on their own and they used that. He stopped. I'm good at seeing patterns. It's what the Corps trained me for. Water, stone, land, it's all pattern. Tess nodded. She did not say anything else about it. She called the attorney in Pulaski that afternoon. On the 3rd Friday after the piece ran, a man in a clean field jacket knocked on Tess's door at 10 in the morning. He introduced himself as Cord Fosley, said he represented a land stewardship organization interested in conservation easements in the region, and that he'd read about her heritage grain work with admiration. He had an easy manner, the kind that came from years of being told it was an asset. He talked about conservation values. He talked about tax benefits. He talked about what a partnership might look like. Tess retaining operational control, the organization providing capital support for the seed preservation work, a small administrative fee structure routed through a vehicle he would explain in detail at a second meeting. He set a folder on the table. He said he wasn't here to pressure her. He would love to come back when she'd had time to look it over. Tess said she'd be in touch. At the door, he said, I was glad to see the Ledger piece. Greta does good local coverage. Tess smiled. She does, she said. I've read all of it. Something shifted very slightly in his face, not much, just enough. After he left, she called Fletcher. Then she called the attorney. Then she called the County Economic Development Office, whose director she had known for a decade, who had contacts at the Tennessee Department of Agriculture, who had, as it happened, been looking for exactly this kind of documented pattern for a year and a half. She gave them the folder Cord had left. She gave them the printouts Fletcher had assembled. She gave them the attorney's notes from the preliminary consultation and the names of the two women in Leoma and Columbia, who had, she had learned in the intervening weeks, been trying without success to find anyone who would take their case seriously. The attorney called it a gift. The economic development director said he'd been waiting for someone careful enough to sit still for it. Tess said she'd had help. That evening, Fletcher was finishing the last section of the upper drive when Tess came out with the dog and sat on the stone wall at the edge of the gravel. She told him what had happened, what she'd given them, what the director had said. Fletcher worked while she talked, prying a heaved section of paver, leveling the base, resetting it. He did not stop to respond. He just listened and worked, the way he always did, and when she finished, he tamped down the edge and straightened and looked at the drive. That's the last section, he said. I know. He loaded the tamper onto the truck. He cleaned the level and the pry bar and laid them in order on the tailgate. Tess stayed on the wall. The light had gone low and gold across the field, the way it goes in Tennessee in late March, and the winter rye she had planted in November was coming in pale green along the lower terrace. It would be ready in June. She had a variety in the grain barn that hadn't been in commercial production since 1962, and this spring she was going to plant 3 acres of it and see what it did. She was thinking about this when Fletcher closed the tailgate and turned and looked at her sitting on the wall, with the dog at her feet and the field going green behind her, and something in his chest did what it had been doing for 2 months without his permission. He walked back. He didn't sit. He stood at the edge of the wall beside her. June asked me something last week, he said. Tess waited. She asked if Miss Tess was going to come to our house sometime. Tess looked at him. I told her I didn't know, that you were busy, that you had the farm. He paused. She said, Daddy, that's not the reason. The field held very still the way fields do just before evening. She's not wrong, Tess said. No, Fletcher said. She never is. The dog got up and moved to sit between their feet. Neither of them said anything for a while. The rye went on, turning green in the low light. They arrested Cord Fosley on a Wednesday morning in April. Crouched. The state attorney general's office coordinated with the economic development director and 2 other counties that had been quietly gathering documentation. Greca Fain resigned from the Harlow Ledger 2 days before the story broke, which told you something about what she had already been told. The Ledger ran a correction and then a full piece about the scheme with a byline that was not hers. Fletcher read about it on his phone at the kitchen table while June ate cereal across from him. Did something happen? June said. She was watching his face. Something good, he said. She wrote in her notebook. He did not ask what. She turned it around to show him a circle with a dot, and beside it, Tess. He looked at his daughter for a long moment. Yeah, he said, that's about right. June put the notebook in her pocket and finished her cereal. May came in warm and dry, which was good for the winter rye, and not always common in Harlow. Tess was in the grain barn one Saturday morning, cataloging the new season's yields. When she heard the truck on the gravel, she wasn't surprised. She had stopped being surprised by him sometime around February. He knocked on the barn door even though it was open. June wanted to bring you something, he said. June came in past him with a small clay pot, held in both hands the way children carry things they have been told are fragile. Inside the pot was a seedling, maybe 4 inches tall, a pale yellow-green planted in careful dark soil. I grew it, June said, from the one you gave me. In January, Tess had given her a single heritage sunflower seed from the grain barn, a variety called Hopi Black Dye, which Tess had been growing from a collection acquired in 2019. She had shown June how to press it into soil how deep, how to water it from the bottom. She had not expected the girl to remember. Tess looked at the seedling. She looked at June. "You kept it alive all winter," she said. June nodded. "I wrote it down every day," she said, "when I watered it, what the soil looked like, what the light was like. Daddy helped me put it by the south window." Tess set the pot on the barn shelf beside the glass jars. She pulled over the stool and sat at June's level. "Do you want to plant it outside?" she said. "When it's ready." June looked at her with the particular seriousness of someone who has been waiting to be asked. "Yes," she said. "I know where. I already picked the spot." Fletcher stood in the barn doorway with his shoulder against the frame, and Rennie moved through him the way she sometimes did. Not painful now, just present. The way a song comes back when you're not expecting it. "You'd like this," he thought. "You'd like her so much." He did not hear anything back. He did not need to. "I brought lumber," he said. "If you've still got that raised bed you wanted to build along the south wall." Tess looked up at him. "I do," she said. "It'll take most of the morning." "I have most of the morning." June was already heading toward the south wall to show them the spot she had chosen, the notebook open in her hand, the sunflower seedling left carefully on the shelf. In the barn, among the jars of old seed, its small pale leaves turned toward the door. The three of them went out into the May morning. Tess, with her hand on June's shoulder, pointing at the light. Fletcher 2 steps behind, carrying lumber. The dog moving ahead through the rye, which was coming up green and thick along the lower terrace above a wall that would not move again for a generation. Nobody called it anything. Nobody had to. The joke had never really been a joke. That was the thing about words spoken by accident. Sometimes they are the truest thing a person says, and the rest of the story is just the time it takes to catch up with them.